Welcome to Channel 24. The United States has introduced historic sanctions against Russia's oil giants, while the European Union has just approved its 19th sanctions package. And yet dictator Putin still clings to the illusion that he can win this war. I'm joined to the studio by Irish journalist Caolan Robertson, and we have quite a bit to unpack.
We do.
Yeah, we do. Hi, Caolan. When I'm, representing you as an Irish journalist, I have a feeling to say the Irish journalist with a Ukrainian heart. I don't know. I just have this, feeling about you. So let's begin from the latest decisions. Yes, and given the fact that Russian dictator definitely not abandoning the idea to conquer Ukraine, to create a much more genocide that already we have, and even after multiple talks and some meetings with the American president, he still believes that he can win this war. I don't know, what gives him that faith that he still can fight in Ukraine without any visible signs that he is winning on the battlefield?
Well, because he doesn't have a choice. If Putin doesn't deliver what he's promised Russia and what he's promised all the generals around him, which is the full conquer of Ukraine and all of the oblasts, then he'll be outed. He'll be seen as a failed president, and he'll be thrown out of a window. He doesn't have a choice, so he's going to keep on pushing until the very, very, very last second, and that's still going to lead to his destruction. But he, in his mind, literally doesn't have a plan B. For him to stop and freeze this now or pull back even slightly would be the end of his entire legacy, because this is what he's promised Russia and the people around him. So it's just that faith. And also he hasn't really faced any massive international pushback. The sanctions have been averted through a million different ways, through China, and America are now yo-yoing, but they're pretty much siding, especially Trump, with a lot of the stuff he's doing. So he hasn't really faced a massive, massive obstacle internationally still. I mean, he should. This is why I went to cover the Shadow Fleet, because his ships are still selling Russian oil all around the world through EU waters. His envoy are still visiting the United States and being greeted with red carpets. This is why he's emboldened.
After facing international sanctions, the Kremlin was trying to find any possible way to continue its trading with other countries. So, and one of its ways, its so-called shadow fleets, when thousands of tankers with the Russian oil on its board traveling to China, North Korea, and other countries in Europe, possibly. And I know that you were investigated those tankers in Greece recently. Have you seen those Russian shadow fleets?
We did, and it was unbelievable to see, because these are beaches that, if you're from France, if you're in Britain, these are beaches that Europeans holiday on every single year. And you could be literally staring out a few kilometers and watching Russia's oil machine sail straight past the horizon. So I went to an island called Lesvos, which is in the Aegean Sea. And this is a really busy shipping route for Russian oil tankers. And what they do is something called ship-to-ship transfers to try and disguise their flags, disguise their origin to the countries that they're selling the oil to. So these ships leave occupied Crimea, and they leave different ports in different areas of Russia. They go through the Black Sea, the Bosporus Strait, and they come straight through EU waters. They transport the oil into other ships, and then they go down through the Suez Canal. They go to places like Singapore, China, India, and like you said, North Korea. And it's pretty easy to actually stop this. You can raid these ships, you can put more sanctions on individual captains, you can put more sanctions on individual vessels, you can clamp down on ship-to-ship transfers, but there's a lot of money to be made in this, there's a huge amount of corruption involved in it. But when I got to the Greek islands, the first thing I noticed was that no one wanted to talk to me about it. None of the fishermen, none of the people in the port, and actually none of the local journalists wanted to really touch it. This story has only really been done by DW, Bellingcat, and some of the more international organizations, because there's a huge amount of Russian money and influence on these islands, and people are under pressure not to talk about it. So for me to even get on a boat and go out and try and get a shot of these ships, I had to agree on paper for the fisherman to not even show the shape of his boat, to not show anything about it, just the water and just the end, because he literally said that they would set his boat on fire if he was caught facilitating journalists showing what's happening, because a lot of these Russians and these Russian tanks pull up on these islands. They pull up in Malta as well. They get serviced on these islands. Some of the parts and the spare parts and the repair parts are done on these islands, and there's a huge amount of money to be made in it. So the first thing I realized was how dangerous it is to even talk about it, because there's Russian influence everywhere. But these ships are coming through constantly, and Russia made in 2024 $108 billion from sales of oil and gas to the federal state. And this is mainly done through the sea, because Russia uses the sea as another battlefield. And it's happening, and we're allowing it to happen. This can be stopped overnight. And America just announced potential new sanctions. But sanctions have been announced since 2022, sometimes since 2014. And still, I watch those ships go straight past beaches in Greece, completely unacceptable. And again, they're not just ships carrying oil. They're ships carrying oil that pays for ammunition, that pays soldiers' salaries to kill Ukrainians. They're carrying money to pay for Russia's war. And some of these ships, just last week, were also carrying stolen Ukrainian grain from Zaporizhia and occupied Crimea and Kherson that was sent on a ship, and it went all the way down the Suez Canal, and it ended up in Yemen. And Bellingcat did an investigation into this, trying to figure out how on earth it passed EU waters. And they're doing this constantly. At the same time, Russia bombed the Odessa port 50 times since 2022 to stop grain being legitimately sold, Ukrainian grain, to the rest of the world. They steal grain from farmers from occupied areas and sell it to other countries. And it's absolutely unbelievable to watch, to physically see it with your own eyes.
You know, I have so many questions to follow up. The first one about the captain of the tanker. Is he bribed? How much he's getting for that very dangerous type of work he's doing?
Well, it's not just the captains, it's everyone that facilitates these transfers.
Everyone, okay.
It's everyone on these islands who are supplying parts, who are supplying accommodation, who are doing repair works for these ships. Some of the parts to the outside of these boats are sort of big rubber sort of tires that go on the edge of each one, so that when you do a ship-to-ship transfer, they don't sort of crash into each other. Those parts are supplied on some of the islands, on the Malta Islands as well. So there's a link always in European Union countries to facilitating the sale of Russian oil and gas. And individual captains who are Russian captains can be individually sanctioned. There's hundreds of them already on lists. But there's 1,600 vessels in the Shadow Fleet that go way beyond that. But there's also people that I spoke to on the Lesbos island that were Greek nationals that also admit off the record that they were on board some of these ships as crew to help out, because there's a lot of money in it, but they wouldn't obviously talk to me about it on camera. So it's a big industry. It's very complicated. I put it all together in the documentary that I'm putting out in the next couple of days. But one of the shots I got finally after days and days of watching and looking at maritime traffic was one of these ship-to-ship transfers. And if you were standing on the coast, you could just about see it, but we got as close as possible. And I actually managed to film the hose linking the two ships together. Well, the captain did. So this is galling to see, but it's paying for the entire war machine. And it's not just stolen grain or oil, it's also spying and espionage, right? Denmark's airport had to be closed a month ago because drones were taken off from a Russian ship in the Baltics. And in the Baltics, some of these Russian Shadow Fleet ships carry laboratories looking for undersea cables. They drag their anchors across the sea floor trying to sever internet cables and electricity cables linking Germany to the Scandinavian countries. So it's spying, stealth, espionage, stolen grain, and money to pay for its war, all on our waters, all in Europe.
Everything is connected.
Yeah, well, that is the Shadow Fleet.
It's
sabotage, espionage, oil, stolen grain, and it's all part of Russia's war machine. And it's all coming through our waters, through European waters. We can stop this immediately, and we're still not taking it seriously enough. And I think it's because of corruption and money.
And just a small remark that a single Shadow Fleet tanker can carry on enough oil to power a middle-sized European country for a few days. Yeah,
some of the larger ships can carry up to 1 million barrels, which is huge. Yes. And you can see on the video that I have, as the tankers transfer the oil, one gets heavier and they sort of go up. It's a massive amount of oil, and it's a huge amount of money. It's millions of dollars per ship. And that's why this is allowed to take place, because there's big money in allowing Russia to continue doing what it's doing despite sanctions. And again, it can be stopped overnight. And so that's why I went to this island, that's why I investigated this, because what Russia's doing here on the battlefield is not, it's not the end of its war. Its war is with everybody. Its war is with stolen grain, it's with oil, and it's about the financing of it. It's about what it's doing to countries all around the world. And it's so important for people to know that.
Have you spoken or have you tried to speak with the government in Greece?
No, I didn't attempt to. As soon as I got there and realized that it was almost impossible to report on this, anyone who has any connection to this, MPs, government, would just say, oh, we didn't know about this, no comment. I mean, people are incredibly bribed and corrupted. It's actually very significantly in Greece, in Greek politics, because of Russian influence and Russian money. So I would get nowhere with that. It would be a waste of time. The best thing to do was to actually go out and show it happening and film it.
Yeah, do you have any hope that you will see your investigation and will react on this?
Maybe. I think what's good is the reach of the films that I've been doing recently are now getting more and more attention. The Farmers of Kherson looks like it'll be screened at EU Parliament in 2026, which is great. And that'll be showing decision makers in positions of power who can vote what is happening to farmers in maybe a city they might have never heard of before, and the bigger scale of it as well, right? This is an attack on food from the breadbasket of Europe. This is about food markets. It affects everybody in Europe. You know, 80% of our sunflower oil comes from Ukraine. Everyone in Europe relies on Ukraine for its stability and for its food in a lot of ways. And it's an attack on that itself. So that film's going to be screened at EU Parliament, which is great. But something like this is something I would push to get in front of as many policymakers as possible, because unless people really see it, not just have it described in articles, but see those ships carrying that oil that pays for missiles and ammunition in their waters, they're not going to make a decision. Yeah,
and speaking about the farmers of Kherson, Alexander Hodyенko, who was the main character in your movie, he was awarded as a hero of Ukraine after his death. Yeah. So I think that quite a good achievement. That everybody was voting for that in Ukraine, a lot of Ukrainians, and finally we have that right decision from the Ukrainian government.
Yeah, because once there's enough pressure on something through media and through, Alexander's daughter did all of that work. She was incredible.
Yes.
Then that's when policymakers actually start making a difference, because they care about what their voting population thinks about. That's why I always say that if you can actually have a lot more power in politics through media and through information than if you're an individual politician, because you can make people on a general scale aware of something and put pressure on their local government. And that makes a huge difference.
And we had a conversation with you that after your movie, there is a clear vision and understanding that Alexander Hodyenko, it was unfortunately just the beginning of the story, because now Russia is hunting for other farmers in Kherson. Am I right?
That was just the beginning. He was a symbol, an icon of food, of hope, of resilience in Kherson for other farmers. And killing him was to send a message to other farmers, not to plough their fields, not to carry on making food. And I predicted that this would be the beginning of what Russia's always done, which is the famine in the Soviet Union. And a month ago, 84 years old, Grandma Laura, she's known as in the town, she had 20 goats and she was in a place called Antonivka, east of Kherson, constantly under fire. And Zarina asked her, why are you staying? Why don't you leave Kherson? And like most Chersonians, they say, this is our land. Why would we have to leave just because of what Russia's doing? They just shouldn't have to. And the Russians killed her by dropping a grenade on her. And there's a photo, which is graphic, but important for people to see, of the two goats lying next to her body in the streets. And now there's 18 goats wandering around looking for their owner in Antonivka. And Zarina's trying to find those goats right now as we're speaking. She's trying to find a farm that they can go to. But it's so dangerous, it's impossible to even do civilian evacuations in this area. But it's important for people to see this, because it's the horror that people have to live with every single day in that city. And again, those Russian drone pilots can see that it's an old lady with two goats. They don't see a person in military uniform. They don't see a tank. They see someone who's innocent. And that was undescribably evil to see. People need to see it.
Caolan, winter is coming and Russia is working on that Ukraine will be frozen this winter as the winters we had before. And, you know, Ukraine is also fighting back. We have quite a successful attacks on Russian energy infrastructure, oil ports, and etc., Moscow city. But do you think that Ukrainian government is realizing that in return, Russia could wipe out our energy infrastructure, to be honest?
Well, I think Russia's been trying to do this anyway since 2022. The only difference this year is that Russians are facing it. Ukrainians have they've adapted to every single winter being in darkness, being in the cold. Since 2022, this is what Russia has tried to do. They've tried to hit thermal plants, energy stations, and Ukraine's energy department has been amazing in trying to diversify their energy systems across this country now. So it's not the old Soviet style, it's lots and lots and lots of different plants. And it's amazing to see this happen in wartime. But what's interesting this year is this is the first winter that Russians are going to start to freeze since the full-scale invasion. And that's different. And that's bringing the war to individual people in a way that they will have never felt before. People who have only consumed Russian propaganda, people in Siberia, people outside of Moscow who only get their news from Putin, are now wondering why they can't turn the heating on, are now wondering why they're freezing, are wondering why they can't get gas in their petrol stations. And that's different. And that's putting a lot more pressure on Putin in a way that I don't think he can control the narrative. Putin governs his country because he can control the narrative of his country. He has full control of this. Anne Applebaum talks about this, and autocracies and dictators. And that is something that is out of his control. And no one really knows what the reaction is going to be to that. I mean, for me, Russians, I know they've been through, they're happy to live in poverty, right? They're people from the Soviet Union, they're used to breadlines. But for it to happen like this quickly, this fast, means he can't control the narrative around this. And that's going to be really interesting to see.
Well, but the attacks this year, it's somehow, yeah, you see it's different. Do you think Russia has studied the Ukrainian energy infrastructure so specifically, or somebody in Ukraine on the ground is leaking information about vital energy sites in Ukraine?
Yes, there's huge amounts of sabotage in this country. Russia thought that it could take Kyiv in 3 days, right? They thought that they would storm in, everything would be fine, they'd take the country. They've realized throughout every single year that Ukraine is basically impossible to invade. So now they're developing every single tactic they possibly can, paying teenagers, paying poor people, paying people to spy on thermal sites, send plants. You know, whenever I go to Kherson or Odessa, I've got to be extra careful, not just of drones, but of spotters, you know, people who are paid by Russia to send geolocations to have people killed. Because it's an act it's just a new tactic. But yeah, I mean, I think the strikes that we've seen in the last few days will have been done from spotters. The strikes that have hit very important sites have been done because of inside information. And that's what Russia relies on. And Russia are also experiencing the same thing. 2 weeks ago, Russia lowered the age of criminal sentencing from 16 to 13 for spies and for people doing tip-offs and arson, because Ukraine are also doing that. So it shows that it's also going on there. But again, Ukrainians have an unbelievable ability to adapt, especially in the cold winters. And I saw a great tweet a couple of days ago saying it's because of literally like the warmth and the energy in the hearts of Ukrainians that keep them warm at winter. But Russians, I don't know how they're going to cope with that. It's a different story.
Yeah, absolutely. Was you expected, or you not in the list of that naive people who were thinking that United States will give us tomahawks?
I don't listen to a sentence that comes out of the United States now. If Trump says that he's going to send 1 million US troops into Ukraine tomorrow and stealth bombers and bomb the Kremlin, I actually wouldn't listen to it. I'd say, great, interesting. Because the next day he would say he is going to lift all sanctions on Russia. And there's no point in listening to a word of it. And the soldiers that I speak to, whenever I go to the front line, I always ask them what they think of US politics, what they think of Trump. And their answer is very similar. They just say, we don't care. Right now, we're just focusing on our job, defending our land. The US can do whatever it wants because it's a different story every week. So honestly, unless the tomahawks arrive in a big, beautiful box in the middle of Kyiv, and I can see it, and I can see the box being opened with a blue ribbon on top, then I'm not going to listen to anything. I have to see them.
Yeah, but I was reading that they have a much more interesting weapon other than tomahawks for Ukraine, and much more easier for the Sioux using them. So probably, I don't know where we're focused on that specific long-range missile.
We don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's again, I just think it's good to just not listen to anything that Trump says about this. Because what is good is the US are still supplying the most important thing, which is intelligence for Ukraine. They're allowing their satellite information
well, that's
for
a
targets.
Good thing. Right.
That hasn't stopped. That doesn't look like it's going to stop, and that's good to maintain. So.
Yeah, something was impossible for Ukraine under Obama presidency. Then something was impossible under Biden's presidency, like Tomahawk was complete no.
Yeah.
With Trump, Tomahawk is no but. Well, that's what I hear. Because I was just maybe a few days ago, I had the interview with a former Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dmytro Kuleba, when he said, listen, the approach of the United States is always like that. They are saying no. Then in a month, maybe, then no again, then they making a decision, and usually it's in favor of Ukraine. So we'll see, maybe something will change.
Maybe it's also a lot of, Trump likes to test the public opinions of things. So maybe it's saying yes to test public reaction and then see how Fox News reacts, how his audience reacts, and then does it based on that. That's something that someone like Trump would do. But still, I need to see it to believe it.
Oh yeah, and actually speaking about the international troops boots on the Ukrainian soil. I was reading that France has just said that it would be ready, if necessary, to deploy troops to Ukraine in 2026. Do you think that's a really possible statement, or just a political message to the Kremlin?
I think it's a political message, but Britain's been coining this as well. Lots of countries have been coining this, and I don't think it'll make much of a difference. Ukraine is the most advanced and adept, and it's the biggest army in Europe, basically, right now. France and Britain putting troops on the ground, it's a nice symbolism, it's a nice idea. Yes. It would probably be done more for security kind of guarantees. They wouldn't be based anywhere near the front line. They would be in Mykolaiv and Odessa to stop massive advancements. But it wouldn't, I mean, I think there were stats carried out that said if Britain were to go on the front lines of Ukraine right now, replace Ukrainian soldiers, we would run out of ammo in something like 3 days based on the stockpiles we've got. So it's a nice sentiment, but the best thing to do would be to put harsher sanctions on Russia and give Ukraine permissions to do whatever it wants and give Ukraine as much money as possible, because Ukraine knows how to defeat Russia. They know exactly how to do it, exactly where their weak spots are. They just need to be given what they want, what they need, what they're asking for. Putting troops on the ground, I don't think it'll make any difference.
Okay, I wanted you to ask how the situation with that the blogger who's feeding from. Yeah, Sasha from Russia, or no?
Sasha meets Russia.
Meets Russia, okay. So how is that evolving? Because I saw after she confronted you on X, social media, people, I see that like a lot of media started to do their own investigation that how much Russia has have this type of people bribed, talking, for Russia, from their name. So how the story is evolving?
It's all come out now who these people are, how much money they've been paid. It's about $2,000 a month. These are Russian propagandists from lots of different countries. Sasha Meets Russia is the American cheerful Russian version. There's an Italian version, there's an American version, and they all pretend to put out art and culture and music. And it turns out they're all paid by a company called Limitless, founded by a woman called Maria, who works directly with Kremlin propaganda, and they're all just paid. But the most important tale to the story is you've got to be extremely careful with what you're seeing on your newsfeed. And the next time you're scrolling through your feed and you see someone casually talking about how great Russian culture is, how delicious Russian food is, or talking about how they should travel to Russia and how great everything is in a really innocent and colorful and beautiful video, you should think twice. Now that these people have been exposed for literally taking money directly from the Kremlin, it's obvious why. To rephrase it, the next time you see this, and you decide to follow these people, you'll notice that the comments talking about how great and innocent Russian food is turn to comments about how Crimea has always been Russia, about how the Donbass has always been Russia, about how Bucha was fake. And that's the actual intention for all of these people, including directly Sasha Meets Russia. It's to show a friendly face, to get a following, to show how lovely and innocent Russian culture is. And at the deep side of it, and the actual point of it, is to put out Russian propaganda to convince you that Ukraine isn't worth supporting, or that none of Russians' war crimes were legitimate. And it's basically it shows that Russia isn't fighting its war just on the battlefield in this country. They're fighting its war on TikTok, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Instagram, and they're getting very, very good at it. And that's why it's so important to spot these people. The next time you see something like this on your feed, just think twice. Are these people legitimate? Are they associated with it? There's a massive propaganda machine. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Limitless is just one of probably 1,000 different Russian companies that are connected to this. It's really hard to combat. Ukraine can't. Ukraine doesn't need to combat it because Ukraine doesn't need to lie and put out propaganda. Propaganda is lies, right? Ukraine doesn't need to put out propaganda to show how great Ukraine is. It's just a great country.
Actually, that's right. I was just thinking about that because Russia's culture and values and history are so shitty, so they have to hire people around the world and pay them to lie on camera, or even if they're ideologically honestly saying that, to lie to people that everything is great in Russia. But despite that fact, I just saw I don't know the nationality of the guy, but he's definitely from abroad, and he was tasting Ukrainian food on camera. And I'm pretty sure he's not paid by anyone.
No.
He just genuinely like borscht, vareniki, and not a pickled salmon, and everything that we have. So it's so lovely, and it's his honesty.
Yeah. But again, you don't need to lie if Ukraine doesn't need to lie to put out its propaganda. Most of the stuff as well that Sasha Meets Russia most of the stuff as well that people like Sasha Meets Russia put out it's not even Russian culture anyway. It's stolen Crimean dress, literally in her profile picture. It's dances that were stolen by Russia.
And this her freaking kokoshnik, I hate it.
Yeah, it's stolen Russian culture. So it's talking about how great Russian culture is, and none of it is even Russian, because Russia doesn't export beautiful culture, it exports terrorism and cheap Russian gas and propaganda. But yeah, so this is ridiculous, honestly, but it's going to be happening so much more. X is becoming unusable at this point. I mean, my reach is down like 90%, and most of the comments are people like her or Scott Ritter. There was basically a gala that took place in Moscow about 10 days ago, and all of these people were there. Scott Ritter, Jackson Hinkle, she was there, Putin was speaking, and it was organized by Russia Today. And it was basically thanking them all for putting out their bullshit across the world. And they should be thanked by Putin because they did a great job, and they're being pretty successful. Social media can stop this from happening as well.
I thought Russian propaganda could pay much more than $2,000 per month.
If you are Russian, you likely in Russia will do a...
In Russia, yes. But living in Miami or wherever this Sasha is living.
Yeah, I mean, influencers are pretty easily paid. In 2024, we had the Tenet Media scandal as well, right? This was a massive operation, $10 million, paid to give influencers all across Canada and North America hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, including Tim Pool, to put out Russian talking points. When there was a terror attack carried out in Moscow, they blamed Ukraine. They were emailed to say this. This was exposed by a court and revealed at the White House press briefing just before Trump was elected. And a few of those people were arrested. But there's loads of this. I mean, this is like a massive operation. It concludes the next time you hear someone talking about how great Russia is, usually there's money behind it. Tate, the talesman, Andrew Tate's brother, put out tweets yesterday saying Poland should have great relationships with Russia. They're just a bit annoyed because of the old days and the hang-ups of the USSR. Well, the USSR doesn't exist anymore, so let's all get on with Russia. Probably paid to say that. I mean, this is everywhere, and it's elevated to the top of our news feeds as well. That's why information is so important, because it's the online battlefield.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that money behind that approach of people. And I'm thinking about the big politicians like Viktor Orban or Robert Fico. And for me, I was thinking about them, that if behind Robert Fico, I think there are money behind him and Lukoil company that are delivering oil to his country. But Viktor Orban seems like ideologist. Seems like he's definitely love Putin and the culture and everything. And that's also a problem. Not only money, but I think also this sincere ideology of everything that Kremlin is trying to push as a truth to the world.
Yeah, if you're pro-Russia outside of Russia, you're either paid by Russia or you're an idiot and you believe Russian propaganda. And he's probably the second. So it's
probably both.
Probably both. Yeah, because if you've been watching what Russia's been doing since 2022 and you still support that, then there's something deeply wrong with you, or you're making loads of money. It's pretty obvious.
You know, I was never asking you the question that someday we will definitely win the war, and Russia's war in Ukraine will stop. How do you see we should build our future with Russians next to us? How South Korea made with North Korea? Shall we wait for this kind of redemption from Russians? Because I've heard that it could be a part of this healing process. Because I'm not believing that, but probably you do. So how do you see that our future post-war reality between Ukraine and Russia?
I can't speak for Ukrainians, but I mean, everyone that I've spoken to in government, people in military, have basically hammered home the point that there needs to be tribunals after this war is over. And they're keeping lists of every single person that abducted a Ukrainian child, of every single person that committed atrocities in Bucha, of every single person, every tank commander, every missile operator, everyone who had a house stolen, who stole a house in Crimea, who sold a house in the Donbass. Every single person is on a list, and those lists are being taken every single day by the SBU and GUR. And that's because Ukrainians plan for the future, which is massive tribunals. And I don't think this country are going to let Russia rest for generations after this war. They're going to go after and hunt down every single person that was associated with this war, as they should, so they have their day in court. And Ukraine, I don't think Ukraine gave Russia a second chance after the collapse of the Soviet Union, after it was treated terribly. Ukraine fell victim to Russian influence over 20 years, right? With its presidents, with its government, with its politicians. Russia poured billions of dollars, billions of rubles into Kyiv, buying up the luxury properties, buying up everything luxury in Odessa, making it seem like speaking Russian was the luxury language, making it seem like they were high society and glamorizing their own country. And that wasn't Ukrainians liking Russia, that was Russia influencing in a really underhanded way this country. I don't think Ukrainians will deal with that ever again. The best thing that could happen would be a giant wall between this country and Russia that is a beautiful, like as Trump would describe it, a Trump-style wall.
A Trump-style wall,
yeah.
This is the only way when I agree with Trump, where we need that wall here, not between the United States and Mexico. No,
yes.
We need it between Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, well, the North Korea-South Korea example is good as well. There's a very tense demilitarized zone that nobody can cross. That's how you deal with a hostile neighbor. And Russia will always be hostile. Russia's been a hostile nation for half a millennia, right? They're not going to change suddenly after this war.
Until the empire will collapse.
Until the empire will collapse, it will always continue. Although the Russian royal family collapsed during World War I, continued to be the same way. The Soviet Union was set up, it behaved in the same way. Putin's been set up, it behaves in the same way. It seems like as empires rise and fall in Russia, despite their collapse, it carries on the same way. So maybe it will always be like that. And the only way to deal with it is just to pretend that it doesn't exist, build a beautiful wall, all the other countries bordering that nation should build a nice wall, just be isolated, like a pariah state. That's what North Korea is. We don't do business with North Korea. The rest of the world sees it as a laughingstock, as a joke that should be ignored. And that's what Russia should be.
That's the future for Russia.
It's beautiful.
Okay, Caolan, we really unpacked a lot of things, and I really thank you for the insight you always give into me, you always give into our viewers. And, thank you again for that you are such an unstoppable fighter for truth. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.